Hi everyone, my name is Mike and this is part 2 of the video series I'm doing on the Windows Subsystem for Linux. So in the previous video we talked a lot about just information about what WSL is, why it's important, and the workflow that we use around it. We also talked about the two most important caveats about the lack of access to a GUI, as well as Windows' inability to update the Ubuntu file systems or the subsystems doc files. Excuse me. And in this video, what we're going to do is actually go through the guide step by step. So a couple disclaimers, just like in the last video. If you ever have any issues with this guide, or you come across anything that is incorrect, or you have any suggestions, please feel free to make an issue here. You can go ahead and click new issue. Be as detailed as you can. I'm the only set of eyes on this project, and so all the information you can give me, the more the better. And I will get to these issues as soon as they come up. Also, feel free to send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find those both at github.com/michaeltreat, and you'll see them listed on my profile page. That is also where you'll be able to find the repo for this guide. And I will add this link to the video's description so you can find it there as well. Awesome. So like I mentioned in this guide, what we're going to be talking about is setting up WSL and the Ubuntu app. Once we're done with that, we're going to look at the file systems, but we're going to look at this the last part of the video. So first we're going to install the stuff. Then we're going to update our terminal and go through this doc. Excuse me. Go through this doc, and then at the end of this video, we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about these file systems. So at the end of probably about 5 or 6 more minutes from here, we'll be at a point where you have WSL totally installed and ready to go. Once we reach that point, I'll mention it then. But from then on, if you were to ignore the rest of the video, you would still, at that point, have WSL and Ubuntu totally installed on your app, on your machine, and ready to go. After that point, what we're going to talk about is extra stuff, extra examples, things like that, things that aren't necessarily necessary for you to use WSL, but if you've never used it or you don't really understand the workflow, they would definitely be beneficial for you to watch the rest of those videos. But other than that, let's go ahead and dive in with step 1 on the first doc. So, on the second doc. It'll be O2 WSL. And I'll start from the beginning just so you can follow along. This is the main README. We're going to go to start here where it says intro. And then at the bottom of this at the bottom of this doc, we'll find setting up WSL and the Ubuntu app. We're going to click on that. Now, like I mentioned in the first video, this laptop is brand new. I haven't run through the WSL setup with this laptop, so you'll be able to see everything that that you would see for the first time running through it as well. The only exception to that is I did already update my Windows version. So regardless, let's go through this step. This link will take you to the Microsoft website, and you'll notice that this may change depending on when you're watching this video. Last year in 2017, it said the Fall Creators Edition, and now it says the April 2018 update. Just know this may change. It doesn't really matter because all this does is opens up your Windows update. Looks like I have an update required, but by doing this, this will update your Windows machine to the most recent update, which will allow you to use the WSL feature. So we're going to ignore that for now because I've already done that step, and we're going to go back and move forward. So this install, it says, please read through these steps before we're getting started. So step 1, we're going to enable the WSL feature in Windows. We're then going to install the Ubuntu app from the Windows Store. We're going to finish installing the Ubuntu app, and we're going to update the default software. Then we're going to skip learning our file system and go into updating our terminal. Then we're going to come back to learning the file system. So let's go ahead and jump into this step, first step. So enable WSL feature in Windows. Right click on the start menu and click on settings. So we're going to go here, click on settings, and it says in the search box, type turn Windows features on or off. Click on the item that populates in the list. A window will pop up with a list of folders and checkboxes next to them. Scroll down and check the box for Windows Subsystem for Linux. Right here. In my case, it's third from the bottom. So we check that box. This also has a tool tip here that I'd like to read. It says that this Windows Subsystem for Linux provides services and environments for running native user mode Linux shells and tools on Windows. So we've checked this box. We're going to click OK. Searching for required files, applying changes. Awesome. Windows needs to reboot. For now, I'm going to click Don't Restart, but if you have the time now, you should restart. I'm going to choose not to restart though. And we are done with this, so I'm going to close this. This will install native files, follow any directions that pop up, and restart when asked. You should do this if you have time. Next, install the Ubuntu app from the Windows Store. Click here to go to the Microsoft Store and install the Ubuntu app. Alright. So that brings up this web page. When we click Get, this actually brings up, I'm going to close the web page in the background. What this actually brings up is the Microsoft Store. You'll notice that this actually opens up the app on your Microsoft Store. So from here, we're going to click Get. It's asking me to sign in. I'm going to say no thanks. And it's going to start. Looks like it's downloading. So we're going to let it do its thing. And while we're doing that, we're going to read the next step. Actually, it looks like it's already finished installing. So that's awesome. All right, let's read the next step. Follow the on-screen prompts to install the app. We just did that. When the app is ready, it will say launch. Click launch. And it says installing. This may take a few minutes. It also says over here, this will start the Ubuntu installation. The installation only happens the first time the app is launched, as it's the actual Ubuntu OS installing and mounting to your Windows FS. This needs to be updated. It's not entirely correct, but essentially it's true. Anytime you excuse me, this is true. This is what's happening at this point. This is installing and mounting to your FS. Anytime you uninstall the app and reinstall it, you'll have to do this process again. Make sure to back up important data if you ever uninstall this app, as it's not preserved. What this means is that if you uninstall the Ubuntu app, what happens is all the data that lives in the Ubuntu file system, or whichever distro you use, that goes away. It's just like uninstalling and reinstalling Windows. It just goes away. So just note that you'll have to preserve any data that you need. Next step, while this is installing, I'll read step 3. Finish installing the Ubuntu app. Step 1, it will ask you to enter a username. This will be the root admin user for the Ubuntu FS. It will then ask you to enter and confirm a password. There's a recommendation. Also note that it will protect your password by not displaying it to the screen when you type, but that it is registering your keystrokes. And finally, the prompt will change and you will be on a command line. Type pwd to see where you currently are in the FS. Awesome. So at this point, we have to wait until it's finished installing. So what I'm going to do is pause the video and I'll resume it once it completes. Alright, so it actually completed pretty soon. What happened was these 3 lines showed up all at once. And what it says is, please create a default Unix user account. The username does not need to match your Windows username. The username does not need to match your Windows username. There's a link for more info, and it says enter a Unix username. So that's going to be step 1, or excuse me, step 3, but sub-step 1. So for me, I'm going to enter KT, as my username. And now it says enter new Unix password. And then that step 2 says we'll ask you to enter and confirm a password. So I'll enter my password, retype your new password, password updated successfully, installation successful, and then some extra notes, and then we do see our command line here. So at this point, you are 100% set up with WSL and the Ubuntu app. So now you have all the power. You have the WSL feature enabled and you're up and running. You have a POSIX, a native POSIX environment on your Windows machine. So like I mentioned earlier, if you want to continue off this video, we're going to show you how to update files. We're going to show you the importance between the two file systems, what it actually means to be on one file system versus another file system. We're going to add a couple shortcut commands and some aliases to help you navigate between the two, as far as like what is considered root. So like for here, cd root, where does that bring us? Which file system does it bring us to? So on and so forth. We'll be setting up some aliases to help us navigate between the Ubuntu file system and the Windows file system, as well as some information on where, how, and why to install different pieces of software. So that's what's coming up next. But before we do that, what I'm going to do, and what I recommend you do if you have time, is to do step 4 right now. This can take some time. The first time I did it, it took me about 30 minutes. The second time I did it, it took me about 2-3 minutes. So this can take anywhere between, it says 10 and 30 minutes. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to pause the video, and when it's done, I will resume the video, and we'll go on to updating our terminal. So let me scroll this down. And so I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to bring my terminal up to here. So, okay, step 1, it says type sudo apt-get update. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the terminal for you. I'm going to type sudo apt-get update. Yep. It'll ask me for my password. Awesome. And now what it's doing is going and getting any updates for APT, for apt, and bringing them down. Then what we're going to do is upgrade, and that'll actually tell I think it's APT is application package tracker, I think. But what it is going to tell that to actually go and upgrade all of those new packages. And then we're going to remove any unnecessary packages. It is the actual upgrade process that takes a while. This is at 99%, and I believe it's done now. There we go. So I'm going to clear the terminal again, and now I'm going to type sudo apt-get upgrade, and this is the point here. It says press Y when prompted. So these are all the packages that will be upgraded. It's about 33.7 megabytes. Excuse me. Yeah, 33.7. Go ahead and click yes. Hit enter. And this is the part that can take a while. So I'm going to pause the video here, and I will resume it when this is done. Alright, so it looks like it just finished. And actually it took about 3 minutes. So if you want to do this yourself, it won't actually take that long. Like I said, I'd recommend you do this first. It'll just help prevent any possible bugs from showing up due to this not being updated. But anyways, we just finished step 2. Type sudo apt-get upgrade. And what I'm going to do is scroll back up to the top to show you where my last command was. Okay, so we did sudo apt-get upgrade, and it went through this upgrade process. We pressed Y right here, and it went through all of these process of upgrading these packages. And now we are at the point where we need to do substep 3 and type sudo apt auto remove. Sudo apt auto remove. We're going to press Y when prompted, and I believe it's done now. So at this point, we are truly 100% done with this page. We've enabled the WSL feature, we've installed the Ubuntu app, and we finished installing it, and we've updated our software. At this point, the guide will take you into learning the file systems, but since this video guide, I can do a little bit of explaining while we do the next step. We're going to skip this, and we're going to go to the next step. So in this step, we're going to talk about updating our terminal. So at this point, I do want to point out that, so first I'm going to close this, and I'm going to, this is the Windows Store. I'm going to close this as well. I'm going to come back to here, and you'll notice that Ubuntu was added right here. So I'm going to click this, and what we're going to do, so I'm just showing you that this will bring up the WSL feature, or the Ubuntu app. And this right here is actually running WSL under the hood. The other thing that you can do later on, you can have multiple distributions on one machine. And if you open up Windows PowerShell, and let me show you again where that's at. If you right click on Windows, there's the Windows PowerShell right here. But if you open up Windows and you type WSL, hit enter, since we only have one distribution installed, it knows which one to pull up. But you can also type WSL and whichever distribution that you want to use. I can't remember the command exactly, but you can choose which one you want to run. But you'll notice that these command prompts are really, really similar. They're hard to read right now. We're going to fix that. That's why we're doing that first, is so that you can see this stuff before we dive into the file systems. But you'll notice that this command prompt is very similar to this command prompt. Note that the only difference between doing this, where we type WSL into the PowerShell, and this is where you start at. So if you notice here, I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but it says the command prompt shows us our path to working directory. And if we type pwd, that shows it better. We're at this path. And I'll explain this when we talk about the file systems. But mnt c users killer tree dev. Basically, this is my C drive. This is the users. And this is killer tree dev, the name of the user for my Windows user. When you type WSL into the PowerShell, it starts you on your Windows file system. And when you open the Ubuntu app, it starts you on the Ubuntu file system. That's the only difference, at least in your workflow. That's the only difference between the two. Now, just because this starts you in the Windows file system and this starts you in the Ubuntu file system, it doesn't mean that the Ubuntu app is the Windows file system. It doesn't mean that the Windows PowerShell is the Windows file system. Because remember, these two file systems are connected. When we talk about file systems in the future, it'll make more sense. But essentially, we can navigate from here, this PWD, we can navigate from this location all the way over to here. And if we were to do that in this app, in this right here, this Ubuntu app, we would be considered to be on the Windows file system. So same thing with here. We can navigate over to this directory right here, and we would be on the Ubuntu file system. So we're going to ignore that for right now. I will dive much deeper into that at the very end of this video, but I wanted to explain that because that is the biggest point of confusion that the students that I've shown this to have had. It's not the application that we're running that tells us which file system we are in. It's where we're at, where our PWE is, that tells us which file system we're on. So let's close this and let's come back over here. Let's clear this. Let's type ls. Good. Okay. So clear it again, and we're going to come back to updating your terminal. So I'm going to move this down here. All right. And when we're updating our terminal, regardless of which one we're using, if we're using the PowerShell with WSL, or we're using the Ubuntu app, you'll notice that these are the same colors. You can barely see it here. There's a blue line right there for the root. In fact, if we do cd ... you might see that it changes to the slash. We'll do cd home. You'll see it changes to blue. When you type WSL over here, it's referring to your whichever distribution you're running. It's referring to that distribution's profile. And the profile settings allow you to update the look and feel of your terminal. So when we update the look and feel of our terminal here, it will also update it here. Also, just to point this out, it does not matter which app you use. You can use whichever one you want. They'll both do essentially the same thing. The only difference is just a couple. This step, you have to do an extra step here for type WSL, and then you have a blue background. Here you have a black background. Yep, those are really the only differences at a high level between the two things. So we're going to close this PowerShell, and we won't open that again until we go to the file systems, just so I can show you what it looks like. So here we're going to update our profile. So first I'm going to navigate back to the root, and I'm going to clear. Okay, so here's some information at the top, but I'll let you read through this. Essentially what we're going to do is change our command line so that it looks like this. And here's an example. It'll look similar to that. And if you're familiar with GitHub or whatnot, version control, this is what this part is talking about. So the name of the branch and some of the statuses. This money sign is just the end of this line. So what this doc does is it talks about how to go about updating the .profile, the .profile file. Now this is important because this .profile file, it's an Ubuntu file, it's a subsystem file. And if you remember from caveat number 2, we can't update the subsystems files through the Windows or through Windows or any Windows apps. We have to update them in the way that we're going to show you here. We have to update them through Ubuntu or through whichever subsystem you're using. So let's follow these steps. Open the Ubuntu app and type ls-a. ls-a. So you'll see, even though we've just installed it, it already has some files here for us. And the one we want is .profile. You should see a .profile file in there. If not, then type sudo touch profile. Ours is there, so we don't have to do this last part. Now type sudo nano.profile. This will open the file in the command line editor nano. Nano is a command line editor. If you don't want to use nano, you can also use Vim. Vim is already pre-installed. Also, if you have typed Vim like I just did, to quit, it shows it right there. Hit enter to quit. We're going to use nano because that's what the instructions here say, but just note you can use whichever command line editor you prefer. So type sudo nano, let me clear, ls-a sudo nano.profile, and it's going to ask you for your password because we use the sudo command. Enter my password, and now you'll see this change, and this is going to be confusing for some people who've never used a command line editor. It can be hard to navigate, but if you look at the bottom, these are the commands you can use to do what you want. If you want to exit, this is Shift and X, I believe, or maybe Control and X. I can't remember which. I think it's Shift and X. That'll be how you quit. Other than that, what it says is delete anything that's in this file, then copy and paste this code into the editor. And it's talking about this code here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to copy all of this. And I will explain what this stuff is in just a minute. But first, let's paste it in. Now, I'm actually going to pause the video here. I don't know how to delete all at once because I rarely use nano. So 1 second. All I'm going to do is delete this stuff. Alright, so like I said, all I did was delete everything in that file. Now what we're going to do is right click, and what this did was it pasted everything that we copied into this file. And now most of this code, and I'll start up here, anything with a hashtag is a comment. It actually isn't any code that's running. It just explains what the code below it is doing. So this function here, it says get current branch and get repo. What this means, these two things at the top here do, they just handle that piece of code, excuse me, that part of the line that shows this. It handles showing you what your branch is and what some status is. And we can ignore that. And then down here, this PS1, right here where we say export PS1, what this is doing is actually showing us what the command line should look like. So we don't have to dive into this, and I'll show you a way where you can create your own code, or a site that can help you create your own code. But that's what's going on here. And it says in this comment, everything above this point is used to change how your terminal looks. If you ever want to change how your terminal looks, let me go up. Actually, I should have just looked on the web page, but if you ever want to change how your terminal looks, change things above here. So again, important to note, everything above this point from here and above changes how it looks, and nothing below here will change how your terminal looks. Rather, it will change how some things about it works. So up here is looks, down here is functionality. So let's take a look at this. Okay, so we'll take a look at this section in the doc, because the doc will actually explain what this stuff does. So we're going to scroll down past this code. All right, and step 4, it says after pasting that in, you will need to add your Windows username right after /users, i.e. users Michael Leon Treat. What it's talking about is right here. After C users, Windows username, this is where it's talking about in our text editor, excuse me, in our nano editor. So if you're not sure where to find your Windows username, it's the name of the user that you sign onto your machine with, this one. You can also go to this PC, go to your OS, go to users, and for me, I only have one user here and a public user, but this is my Windows username. So what it's saying is to go, and we're back over here on this terminal, it's saying to go to this point, to delete everything after users, and type, in my case, killer treat dev /. Okay, so up we can close this. This was just to show you how you can find your user. We're going to move this over. And then step 4, after pasting that in, you will need to add your Windows username right after users, which we just did. After that, you're done in this editor. So press Control+X. So yeah, it is Control+X at the same time to quit. And it will ask you if you want to save changes. Hit Y. And it will then ask you to write what name to file. Just keep it the same by hitting Enter. Cool. So that's done. And now we're on to extra info. So in this extra info, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and reopen it. And what this should do is allow us to see the new terminal layout. So now you'll see that mine shows killer treat dev and a money sign. And the reason is, we'll explain the reason why it shows that now in this extra info. But if we type pwd, you'll see that, I don't know if you remember earlier, I talked about what it means to be on the Windows file system versus Ubuntu. So at this point, we actually are now in the Windows file system. And the reason that we did this is because of something we added in these last bit of sections. So earlier when I talked about the Windows PowerShell, and the only difference is that when you start Ubuntu, it starts on the Ubuntu file system. And when you start the PowerShell, it starts on the PowerShell file system. It starts on the Windows file system. Well, we just changed that. And the reason we changed that is because we're going to be doing the vast majority of our work on the Windows file system. And this allows us to use our Ubuntu app a little bit more effectively. This way we don't have to actually open the app and then navigate to our Windows file system to begin our work. We can just do this. So I'm going to explain some of this extra info, and then we're going to jump into the file systems. And let's take a look at this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show what I'm going to show what we typed in, and nano.profile. Cool. And if you can see this here, it says this allows you to switch between the Ubuntu root and your Windows root. WR evaluates to the absolute path to your Windows user's root, and this gives us a quick way of moving directly to the Windows root, and this brings you to your Windows working directly immediately when you open a new terminal. So really, you notice, like I said, these hashes, these are all comments. There's really only 3 lines here of actual code. One of them is this export WR equals this. What we're doing here is we are setting a variable that allows us to basically reference our current user. In our case, it's my user. It's me. It's my user on my Windows user. And so if we were to open another shell and I type WR, so we export it as WR, but in order to invoke it, we use the money sign first. So if I type money WR, you'll see that it says that it'll basically say this, right? It is saying this path, which is what we have here at tilde ... I'll explain more about what that is later on, but what we've done is we've set a variable here called WR that allows us to reference our Windows file system and the user on that Windows file system. And at this point, if we type ls here, you might be able to see what some of these things are. They may look familiar to you, but if we go back to our Windows file system, we go to our PC, we go to OS, we go to users, kill retreat dev, you'll see that what these two things are exactly the same thing. See, we got 3D objects, Ansel, app data, which doesn't show up here because it's a hidden file, I guess, or something like that. It does exist, and we'll show that in the last section here of extra info. We have application data, so on and so forth. Basically, we're showing that these are this is the same thing. These are the same locations on our file system. This is our POSIX environment accessing our Windows file system. This is our Windows file system accessing the Windows file system. So we're going to close that, and we will close this for now. So let's look at extra info. Basically what this talks about is WR, the same thing we saw right up there, WR. WR is a variable that lets us that references this path. And then we set up an alias. What an alias is a command that when you type it, it executes something. And in our case, cdwr, what it does is it executes this command of cdwr. The reason we chose WR is it just stands for Windows root. Yeah, that's it used to be cd tilde no space, but that was confusing for people to say. And it was also confusing for people to type sometimes. So the feedback we got was WR made a little bit more sense because it stood for Windows root, and the command of cdwr with no space made more sense than cd tilde no space. So I'm going to close this now, and if you remember, cd tilde takes you back to the root. Well, the root in our case is living on Ubuntu. We don't want to do our work here. We want to do it on the Windows file system. So when we type cdwr, it takes us over to our Windows file system. So those are the two extra things that we did that makes navigating between the two file systems pretty easy. So we're on the Windows file system now. If we want to move over to the Ubuntu file system, we just type cd root, and you'll see we're on the Ubuntu file system. cdwr moves us over to the Windows file system. So by adding this last section here, really just gave us the ability to navigate between the two really easy. The other thing we did is we added this cdwr command here. This is an actual invocation. It is executing this command on load. So it may be too quick to see, but yeah, it was too quick to see. So as it loaded, it automatically navigated us there, and there's nothing above it. So it automatically navigated us to our Windows root. So that's all that does. Let's see if there's anything else in here. This is just more explanation of the exported variable WR. This is explanation of the alias. Now this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is going to segue us into the file systems. Before I do this one, actually, if you want to change how your terminal looks, this is how your terminal will look with the code I've provided, because it's very simple. It's not anything crazy. I feel it's a good middle ground for people. If you want to find your own, there's 2 links here that will allow you to create your own. You can follow these sections. Basically, you plug in this case you drag and drop, and what it does is it shows you how it looks, and it gives you some code here. And what you would want to do is take this code and come back to the editor over here, and again, like I said, everything above this point and everything below this point, what you would want to do is take everything above this point and replace it with that code you're given over here. Same thing with this. This is another prompt generator. You click these things, there's extra characters and extra tabs. You can add emojis here, so on and so forth, and you can change the colors. So if you click on username, you can change your foreground, and so it changes username. Yeah, and then what it does is it provides you a code here. This is the one that I used to generate the code that we use in the guide, but again, you can use whichever one you like. And those are found right here and right here. You can also find other editors online as well. Awesome. We're going to skip installing software because that's going to be in video 3. But for this video, we're going to finish up with understanding the file systems. So when we come back to Ubuntu, I'm going to close the other one as well. So we're on Ubuntu. And if you notice, when we type pwd, we are on the Windows file system. And when I say that, when we're on the Windows file system, if that doesn't make sense, it will in a minute, or it should in a minute. So let's start with the Ubuntu and Windows. So right here, when we type pwd, we're on the root, we're at home/kt. So if you've ever used Ubuntu before, this is how Ubuntu sets up its pathing. On Windows, it's under users, but for Ubuntu, it's under home. And so anything under the home directory here, any other directory here would be users. So if we type cd ... you'll see that this prompt changes. It lets us know our working directory is home. If we type pwd, you'll see that we're on our home directory. If we type ls, you'll see that we have a directory for kt, which is our user. If we type cd ... one more time to go above home, and we type ls, we'll see this is the absolute root, the topmost level of our Ubuntu drive. If we type cd ... again and ls, we're at the exact same spot because there is nothing higher than this point. So you'll notice a bunch of things in here, but there's really 2 things you should pay attention to, and that's home and mnt. So if I type ls home kt, and there's nothing there because we don't have a file, but this is referring to our user. Excuse me. And then if we go into mnt, cdmnt, we type ls, we'll see a C and a D. What this is MNT, I don't know for sure, but it makes me think of the word mount. And what we're saying is that at this point is where the C drive is mounted and the D drive is mounted. And those C and D drives are referring to the C and D drives of your Windows machine. So we have a C drive and a D drive. So I didn't even know I really had a D drive until I started making this video. But Oh, and there's a terabyte. Anyways, so if we type ls and we move into the C drive, and we type ls, and we come over to our Windows Explorer, and we double click open our C drive, you'll see that a lot of these things are the same, right? We have eSupports, perflogs, program data, program files, and files 86, eSupport, perflogs, files 86. You'll see in here users. We've got users here, Windows old. So at this point over here, once we've reached into our C drive or our D drive, from this point on, when we typed ls here, everything at this file, at this directory, and below it, meaning anything inside of it, is considered your Windows file system. So even though we're on the Ubuntu app, we are now, even though we're using the Ubuntu app, we are on the Windows file system at this point. So if we type cd ... to go up one more, we're at MNT. We type pwd. We're at MNT. At this point, anything from here and above is considered the Ubuntu file system. So this MNT is the mounting point, right? That is the cutoff. That's how I think of it, and how I've been using this since for like 9 or 10 months now. So anything at this point and above is an Ubuntu file, right? Because it lives on the Ubuntu file system. And everything from either of these directories and below is a Windows file because it lives on the Windows file system. All the Ubuntu app does is connects these two systems into one system, but you do have to note that they are separate files. So the reason I'm repeating myself on that is because I want to make that as clear as possible, because that is the only hiccup there is into developing and working with this WSL app. If you understand that, great, because that is the biggest thing that people have had to overcome before they can start working on this. So now I'm going to show you where this point is on the Windows file system. And what I just explained was right here. It may not, no, it's not right here. In the other doc, I'll show you where that is in the other doc. But this path is for the Windows file system. And it's in the extra info. This is in 04, updating the terminal. It's probably not a good spot. I'll probably move this over to the 03 doc. But here it says, an extra info, 3. In case you ever need it, the Ubuntu FS lives on your Windows FS on the path that looks similar to this. And it gives us this right here. So what we're going to do is open up Windows Explorer. And it's in our C drive. I'm going to start from the beginning. C, users, and then here it says user, but that just means whichever user you are. And then there's app data. Now, like I said earlier, app data doesn't show up here, but if you click right here, you can type /app data, and it comes up. Hit enter, and now we can see the rest of these things. What we want is local packages, and then there's this one right here, this weird looking one, Conical Group Limited, Ubuntu on Windows. Double click that. Then it's at local state, root fs. And now you see the Ubuntu file system, right? If we look back at our shell, and up here, we saw this stuff. You'll notice that this stuff matches everything that's over here, right? So this is what that path looks like to get there. So notice that this Windows Explorer, this is an app obviously on the Windows side, and it's showing these files that live in our Ubuntu file system. So this is also another example of how these two systems are connected. Now note this caveat about Windows cannot edit files. So even though we are in this spot right here, and this is basically the Ubuntu file system, you should not be editing any files here, ever. It may work, it may not work, you may get errors. so on and so forth. Just don't ever do it from this point here. I would recommend you never ever go into this path ever again unless you're just curious on what things look like, or you're ready to just explore and you want to uninstall and reinstall, because this will cause major bugs with the Ubuntu app and how it's synced up and all that stuff. When this changes, I will update this guide and update this video. At this point, never mess with anything in here as a rule of thumb. Having said that, we're not going to mess with anything there, but I do want to show you what it looks like. So if we type pwd over here, we'll see we're at home KT. And if you look up here, we are also at /home/KT. And so this may work, I can't remember if it does, but what we're going to do is on our Ubuntu app, which is allowed to update and edit its own files, we're going to make a new file called test.js. So we've just added a new file, and you'll notice over here, test popped up, right? So when something is added over here, it's successful and it works. And we type ls, we can see test.js here. And now this, I haven't tested this in a while. I'm going to do this just to show you how it breaks. But you saw it was added right away. We can't open it because it's a JS file. I don't know why I did JS, but if we delete it, so usually it won't even let you delete it, but because we're not in the app itself, it probably allowed us. But if we come over here, we type ls, you can still see that test.js shows up here, right? Let's just do nano test and type hello world. Sorry, I saw something change on the other side. Hello world. We'll save it. Yes. Enter. Cat test.js. Cat just lets us see everything inside the file, and it says hello world. So you can see that this file truly does exist on the Ubuntu file system, but now on the Windows file system, it does not exist here. If we go back and we go forward, it still doesn't exist here, right? So this is why I'm overemphasizing this point of never mess with files at this point. Always add them here when you're updating Ubuntu files, because it causes some synchronization errors. And I'm just curious, I don't know what it's going to do, but we do touch test.js. It didn't add it over here again. What if we do a touch testing.js? It did add that here, but you'll notice it didn't add test.js, which still exists here. So there is some sort of synchronization issue here that is not working, and so I believe this may be a bug of some sort. This is why I'm recommending don't do this. Cool. Enough on that. I've beaten this horse dead. It's enough talking about this. What I'm going to do is pause the video. I'm going to uninstall, reinstall, and basically just do everything we did again. So that way, moving forward, we have a fresh install without any possible bugs. Alright, so I just finished uninstalling the Ubuntu app and reinstalling it. So we are ready to go. There's only two things left that I really want to talk about. One is this page. Really, I should have had, if I go back to the next page, this is the one about updating your terminal. Under extra info, there is this line here. This really should have been on the previous page about the two file systems, understanding the file systems. But I didn't get a chance to talk about this doc, but really what it does is just pretty much goes over everything I just talked about. There really isn't any extra info in here that I want to talk about, other than I do want to point out this section here, because again, it's just a re-emphasis of what I was saying before about the importance between understanding which file system you're currently at, and when you make a file, which file system that you're currently at determines where that file lives and what type of file it is. So if you're on the Ubuntu file system and you make a file, it is an Ubuntu file. It is a subsystem file. If you're on the Windows file system, if that's where you're located at, if that's where your working directory is, when you create a file there, that is a Windows file. This is important because Ubuntu can read and write Windows files, but Windows cannot write or update or destroy Ubuntu files. And that includes Windows apps. So again, that's going to be the last time I mention that in this video, but that's important. That's the only thing I want to point out here. The last thing I want to point out is just another tip in updating your terminal. So underneath this section here, where it says MNT C users Windows username, and there's a slash here, this is a recommendation that I would give you. I don't personally like working on my Windows user, like on that Windows user itself. Like I don't like working directly on Michael Leon Treat or on Killer Treat. So what I'd recommend is, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually navigate, because right now my WR command is broken. What I like to do is I like to add a working directory, or like something where all my coding goes into, and that way if I ever accidentally do like an rm-rf, or like I try and delete everything at the current point I'm at, I don't delete my entire user, I just delete my coding thing. It's just a safety thing and an organization thing. So what I'd recommend is going back to your dot profile and updating that line, adding an extra folder there. So in my case, when I try and do a cdwr, it doesn't know because all doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do is go up to mntc users Killer Treat dev, and here I'm going to make a directory called all, and now I'm going to do cdwr. I may have to restart. No, it doesn't. So it brings me directly into all. I named it all because that was me being lazy, and I've done that for a long time, so it's convention for me. But you can name that something like coding or programming or whatever your convention is. But this just means inside of here, I don't have anything. It's fresh. It's brand new. All my projects will go into here. So that's it. That's it for this video. Again, any suggestions, comments, feedback, anything that is broken for you, anything that doesn't work for you, anything at all, please let me know. The more information I get, the better. It'll make this guide better, make everyone that uses this guide better. If you want to contribute to this, please feel free to contribute in any way that you can. Any typos, any other links, anything like that. Adding images. If you want to grab images off of these videos and add them to the guide, that'd be awesome as well. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, if you don't mind starring this repo so starts to spread out a little bit, that would be great. Thanks.